Stop scrolling. Look at this image. Really look at it. Not at him. You know who he is. Look at the other two. Who are they? Where did they come from? Why does no official record place them there? And why, out of every image that circulates online every single day, why did this one stop millions of people mid-scroll and make them feel something they couldn't name? I'll tell you why. Not because it's scary, not because it's strange, but because somewhere in the back of your mind, you've seen these figures before. You just don't remember where. This image didn't come from nowhere. It came from a story that started 70 years ago, in a desert, with a man standing alone, looking at something the rest of the world wasn't ready to see. By the time this video ends, you will understand why this photograph went viral. You will understand why it was removed, and you will be left with a question that no one in power has ever properly answered. Let's start with what we can actually see. Donald Trump, standing outdoors, likely, based on the vegetation and architecture visible, on White House grounds. To his left and right, two figures, both exceptionally tall, estimated 6'2" to 6'4", both wearing identical uniforms, deep crimson red with heavy gold embroidery. Military in style, but matching no known military dress code of any nation on Earth. Look at the skin. Not just pale, luminous, catching light in a way that human skin simply doesn't catch light. Look at the hair, platinum white, not grey, not bleached. White, perfectly uniform, falling in waves past the shoulders. And the facial structure, high cheekbones, a jawline almost too defined, eyes set slightly wider than human standard, and an expression completely neutral. Not nervous, not excited, not performing for the camera, as if being photographed next to the President of the United States is entirely ordinary. Researchers attempted to trace this image. Standard reverse image search, inconclusive. No photographer credit, no event listing, no press pool record, no names. Some analysts identified visual artifacts consistent with AI image generation, subtle distortions in the finger placement, lighting inconsistencies at the collar edges, background blur patterns typical of diffusion models. Others examined the same image and found no definitive proof of manipulation. The debate is still open. But here is the thing about this photograph that most people missed while arguing about whether it's real. Real or artificial, someone chose that specific look, that specific height, that specific hair, that specific uniform, and that specific expression. And if you know the history, if you know what has been reported, documented, and filed in classified archives for over 70 years, that choice is not random. That choice has a name. The Nordic phenotype. And the moment I say those two words, this image stops being a meme and starts being something else entirely. In 2017, the Central Intelligence Agency released 12 million pages of previously classified documents through their CREST, Controlled Records and Electronic System, database. 12 million pages. Most covered exactly what you'd expect: Cold War intelligence, foreign operations, technical assessments. But buried within those 12 million pages, in reports filed by intelligence officers who signed their names to these documents, were descriptions of encounters, of beings, described in clinical, professional language as humanoid, tall, fair-featured, with light-coloured hair, and physical proportions slightly outside human standard. Not science fiction, not speculation, operational intelligence files from the CIA. November 20th, 1952, Desert Center, California, 12:30 in the afternoon. Temperature, 71 degrees. Sky, clear. Wind, light. 6 witnesses, and one man walking alone into the desert. His name was George Adamski, and what happened in the next 11 minutes would change his life, get him monitored by the FBI, produce a book that sold hundreds of thousands of copies, and generate testimony that researchers are still analyzing 70 years later. Adamski was not a scientist. He held no academic credentials. He was born in Poland in 1891, emigrated to America as a child, lived a modest life, ran a small cafe and telescope observation post at the base of Mount Palomar in California, close enough to the famous Palomar Observatory that visitors sometimes confuse the two. He had been watching the skies for years, photographing objects he couldn't explain, writing about the possibility of extraterrestrial life at a time when doing so made you either visionary or ridiculous. On that November morning, he drove into the desert with 6 companions. He told them something was pulling him there. He couldn't explain it, he just knew. At approximately 12:15 p.m., the group spotted an object in the sky, cigar-shaped, silver-grey metallic surface, moving in complete silence. No engine sound, no contrail, no wings. Adamski later wrote, quote, "I felt as if I were in the presence of something so powerful that my normal senses could not fully process what they were receiving." He separated from the group, walked approximately half a mile into a shallow ravine. His companions watched through binoculars, and then a figure appeared. Not from the sky, from the ground, standing in the shadow of a rock formation, waiting, as if he had been there the whole time. What Adamski saw, and what he described in legally sworn testimony, was this. A young man, approximately 28 years of age by human standards. Height, around 5'10" to 6 feet. Hair, sandy blonde, fine in texture, falling in waves to his shoulders. Skin, lightly bronzed, smooth, without a single line or blemish. Eyes, grey-green, slightly larger than human normal, with pupils that appeared more elongated. The forehead, unusually high. The face, symmetrical to a degree that Adamski said felt almost mathematical. And the clothing, a single-piece garment. No seams, no buttons, no fasteners of any visible kind. A shimmering belt, and shoes, if you could call them that appeared to be part of the same material as the rest of the suit. They could not speak each other's languages, so they communicated through a combination of hand gestures, facial expressions, and what Adamski described as direct mental impression, a sense of meaning transferring without words. The being identified himself, through gesture and thought, as coming from Venus. He gave a name, or rather Adamski later transliterated it, as Orthon. And his message, the thing he had come to communicate, was a warning. Humanity's nuclear testing, the atomic bombs, the weapons programs, were generating something in the atmosphere and in space that was dangerous. Not just to Earth, to others, to a much larger neighborhood than humanity had any idea it lived in. Here is the part that most people skip when they dismiss Adamski as a fantasist. He was not alone. 6 people, 6 named, identifiable individuals. George Hunt Williamson, Betty and Buck Bailey, Al and Betty Bailey, and Lucy McGinnis. All 6 watched through binoculars from a distance of approximately a quarter mile. All 6 saw the figure. All 6 saw the craft. All 6 saw the craft, and all 6, separately, signed sworn affidavits before a notary public. Legal documents, under oath, with their full names and addresses attached. Those documents were published in the 1953 book. They have never been legally challenged. They have never been retracted. They exist. And then there is the FBI. The Federal Bureau of Investigation opened and maintained an active file on George Adamski. You can read it yourself. It's on the FBI's own public vault website, vault.fbi.gov. The file documents monitoring of Adamski's activities, his public lectures, his correspondence. The stated reason, quote, "The subject matter is of continued interest at the federal level." Not, "This man is dangerous." Not, "This man is a criminal." Of interest. The FBI monitors things that matter, not things they've already dismissed. February 1954. 14 months after Adamski's encounter. 12 months after his book became an international bestseller. The President of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower, 5-star General of the Army, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in World War II, the man whose decisions had shaped the modern world, was on a working vacation in Palm Springs, California. He had been photographed playing golf. He had attended dinners. He was visible, documented, accounted for. Until February 20th. When, without warning, without announcement, without full security detail, and without any entry in the official White House diary, he vanished. The White House press corps noticed immediately. Eisenhower had been present at a dinner party hosted by Paul Roy, a Texan businessman. He was seen. He was documented. And then, nothing. Rumors spread through the press pool that the president had suffered a heart attack or died. The White House was forced to respond. Press Secretary James Haggerty called an emergency briefing. His explanation? The president had bitten down on a chicken wing, chipped a tooth cap, and had been taken, urgently, quietly, to see a local dentist, a Dr. Francis A. Purcell, for an emergency repair. The Associated Press ran the story. The Los Angeles Examiner published it. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Dr. Purcell did later confirm treating the president. He became locally famous for it, gave interviews, enjoyed the attention. But investigators examining the timeline found that the hours simply did not add up. The window during which Eisenhower was unaccounted for was significantly longer than any dental procedure would require. And multiple witnesses, independent of each other, in different locations at different times, placed the president not at a dental clinic, but at Muroc Army Airfield, now known as Edwards Air Force Base, 70 miles from Palm Springs, in the middle of the California night. The most extraordinary document connected to this incident is a letter, written on April 16, 1954, less than 60 days after Eisenhower's disappearance, by a man named Gerald Light. Light was a respected metaphysical researcher and journalist based in Los Angeles, widely known, widely read. The letter was addressed to Meade Lane, director of the Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, and in it, Light made a claim that even today reads like it belongs in a different category of history entirely. He wrote, and I'm quoting directly, "My dear friends, I have just returned from Muroc. The reality of the otherworld aircraft is now beyond question. During my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials, with the assistance and permission of the Etherians." He described Eisenhower as present, as visibly shaken, as a man who had just witnessed something that had permanently altered his understanding of the universe he lived in. According to 4 separate independent researchers, Timothy Good, Michael Saller, William Cooper, and former Air Force officer and author Charles Hall, drawing on separate sources that had no connection to each other, 2 groups were present at Muroc that night, 2 distinctly different groups, with 2 fundamentally different agendas. The first group was described in terms that will now sound familiar to you. Tall, pale, fair-haired, human in appearance, almost exactly as Adamski had described Orthon, almost exactly as the figures in that photograph. They came with an offer: advanced knowledge, technology, free energy systems, medical understanding beyond anything 1954 science possessed, all of it, freely given. The price? Dismantle the nuclear weapons. All of them. Every warhead, every program, unconditionally and permanently. Eisenhower said no. According to these accounts, he didn't say no because he didn't believe them. He said no because the Cold War had made nuclear weapons non-negotiable. To disarm unilaterally, even in exchange for technologies beyond human imagination, was politically, militarily, strategically impossible. The Soviet Union still existed. The arms race was at full speed, and no president, no matter what he had just seen, could walk out of that base and announce that America was giving up the bomb. So the first group left, without agreement, without a deal. And a second group stepped forward. The second group's offer required no moral courage. It required only secrecy. Advanced propulsion technology, materials science, weapons applications, all transferred to the United States, in exchange for two things. First, access. Permission to operate on American soil, permission to move freely, permission to conduct biological research on a limited number of civilian subjects. Second, silence. Absolute, permanent, institutionalized silence. According to documents obtained in 1984 by researchers William Moore and nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, later known as the Majestic 12 Papers, Eisenhower signed. He authorized the creation of a 12-member Classified Oversight Committee, MJ-12, whose mandate was to manage the relationship, control the information, and ensure the agreement remained the most protected secret in American government history. Now watch this timeline, because this is where the story stops being historical and starts being current. 1954. Eisenhower allegedly signs. 1953 to 1969, global UFO sightings increased dramatically. Governments worldwide open classified investigation programs. 1984, MJ-12 documents surface. FBI investigates, never conclusively debunks. 1989, Bob Lazar, a physicist claiming to work at Area 51, describes reverse engineering non-human craft. His employment there, initially denied by the government, was later partially confirmed. 2017. The New York Times breaks the story of AATIP, the Pentagon's secret UAP program. The Department of Defense confirms it. 2019. The US Navy officially authenticates 3 UAP videos showing objects performing maneuvers beyond any known human capability. 2021. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence releases a UAP task force report. 143 incidents, 0 explanations. 2022. First public congressional UAP hearings in 50 years. 2023. David Grush, decorated intelligence officer, testifies under oath to Congress that the US government possesses, quote, non-human biological material. Under oath, in Congress, on the record. And then, 2026. This photograph. Look at what Adamski drew in 1953. Look at what those witnesses signed affidavits describing in 1952. Look at the Gerald Light letter from 1954. And look at this photograph. The hair, the height, the skin, the expression, the posture, the air of absolute calm, of absolute confidence, of someone who is not afraid of the most powerful person in the room, because they are not impressed by the most powerful person in the room. Whether this photograph is real, manipulated, or entirely AI-generated, Whoever made it knew exactly what description they were referencing. They knew the 70-year history. They knew the pattern. And they chose, deliberately, to recreate it. Next to the 45th President of the United States. Why? 4 theories, no conclusions. You decide. The contact never ended. What Eisenhower began in 1954, if he began it, was inherited. By Kennedy, by Nixon, by Reagan, who mentioned an extraterrestrial threat in a speech to the United Nations in 1987, a comment that has never been satisfactorily explained. By Clinton, who ordered a review of Roswell files and told an Irish journalist, on camera, "If we were visited, I wouldn't be surprised." By Obama, who on a late-night talk show paused, just a beat too long, before answering a question about aliens. The figures in this photograph are not visitors. They are familiar faces. To people in rooms you will never enter. This is controlled disclosure. The Pentagon videos in 2017 were not leaked. They were released. The congressional hearings were not forced. They were permitted. The Grush testimony was not a surprise. It was a signal. And this photograph, real or artificial, is the next signal. A global population being walked slowly toward an announcement too large to make without preparation. You don't tell 8 billion people overnight. You introduce the idea, again and again and again, until the day it's official. It already feels familiar. They were never visitors. Rock art in the Tasselina Azure Plateau in Algeria, UNESCO World Heritage Site, dated to approximately 8000 BCE, depicts elongated humanoid figures with round heads and proportions inconsistent with any human artistic tradition of that era. Sumerian cuneiform tablets describe beings who descended from the sky, taught agriculture, taught writing, taught mathematics, and looked like tall, radiant humans. Sanskrit Vedic texts describe aerial vehicles called vimanas, operated by beings matching descriptions consistent with the Nordic phenotype. 10,000 years of the same description, on every continent, by cultures that never met each other. What if they didn't come from space? What if they came from here? What if they never left? Adamski was a gifted storyteller who knew exactly what people in the 1950s needed to believe. Eisenhower had a dental appointment. The MJ-12 documents were forged, as the FBI stated. The photo is AI. The UAP hearings are political theatre. And we are animals with pattern recognition brains that evolved to see predators in shadows. There are no predators here. There are no visitors. There is only a photograph. And the ancient, incurable human need to not be alone. Maybe. But explain Grush. Explain why a decorated intelligence officer with a security clearance and a career worth protecting walked into Congress, raised his right hand and said, under penalty of perjury, that non-human biological material exists in US government possession. Explain why the Pentagon confirmed video showing objects moving at hypersonic speed with no propulsion system and no heat signature. Explain why the FBI opened a file on a man who described, in 1952, beings that look exactly like what you see in that photograph. Coincidence doesn't keep files. Coincidence doesn't hold hearings. Coincidence doesn't testify under oath. George Adamski died on April 23, 1965. In his last recorded interview, he was asked if he had any regrets. He said, "None. Everything I said was true. The proof is coming. Not from me, from them. And when it comes, people will remember that someone told them first." A viral image. 2 figures. No names, no records, no explanation. A man in a desert 70 years ago. 6 sworn affidavits. A president who disappeared for one night. An intelligence officer testifying under oath. And a description The same description, repeated across 7 decades, across classified documents, across congressional testimony, across one photograph that stopped millions of people mid-scroll and made them feel something they couldn't name. The photograph may be artificial. The pattern it references is not. What does it mean? That we already know what they look like?